Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of our Opus 20, The Dawn of Heroes set review. I am, of course, joined all the way from Japan by Mr. Eureka himself, Jared Wallace. Jared, how are you, sir?
I am good. How about you?
Excellent. Doing well. Happy to dive into our next 3 elements. There's a lot of interesting stuff in these elements, too, so I'm excited to talk about them. Are you ready to jump into Earth?
Yep.
Excellent.
Let's do it.
So our first card is from the Endwalker Beast tribe, Arcasadora, something along those lines. So it can just break any doll forward but it does give your opponent the option, pay 3, otherwise they can kind of save it. For me, it's one too many ifs. So not only does the forward have to be doll, they also have the opportunity to save it. We kind of talked about this the last set too, and I think you've actually really sold me on that. Yeah. You're like, I just don't think the whole tax thing really works, and maybe it's just because you're giving your opponent a choice, right? If they don't really want to save it, yeah, okay, fine, you can break it. Or if they do want to save it, they're gonna pay for it. Now, granted, would this be a great kind of anti-aggro tool? Maybe someone's playing 13, they immediately run in with something, and you can, I've developed a backup and I got rid of something, but I don't know. Yeah, this one's just one too many ifs for me.
Yeah, I think I would have been more excited to play this one if it was like a 2 cost, but then it had like some kind of restriction. You know, like it can only target a forward of cost 3 or less or something like that. Yeah. I think I would have been pretty excited to play this card then. But, you know, as a 3 cost backup that just is not particularly playable, like out the gates, you know, it doesn't get you a card back or anything. It's just a little too situational to ever end up slotting a deck, even in L3, I think.
Fair enough. Next we have the Antlion. I believe first card our little friend here has gotten. Always a pain in the ass fight depending on which game he's in. Definitely in 4. So great mono art. This one's interesting because it's really, we've kind of seen this theme in this set, and we'll see it with some of these cards coming up about backups leaving your field and then getting extra effects. And so I find that kind of interesting, thinking of Ignis and some other cards we'll talk about. However, it does mean it'll probably make it pretty difficult to block with him unless you have something like Crow that you can crack on your opponent's turn, and then he becomes a forward. To note, though, too, it's also not optional, so you could technically make him a forward at the wrong time, and then he gets swept up in the Shantoto board wipe.
Yeah.
And the one other thing I think I would like better about him is that, so if he's dealt damage, you choose a forward opponent controls, and you deal it the same amount of damage. At first, I guess I kind of mixed him and Kalbrenna's text up. I thought it was like, oh, he deals it damage based on his power. It's like, holy moly, you just cactar this thing, right? You just go ping, and you've got like a super Dataluma, but he's only returning exactly what he receives, so I don't know. Like, I like him. I like that he's only a 2 cost, but he just seems a little too niche situational for me to really get into him.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good deal, right? You're getting like a 2CP 9K that kind of dodges some stuff. That's like again, like 2CP Earth, especially when it works with cards like Mirror and stuff like that. It is like a really good deal, but it's just so like unwieldy that I'm not really sure how you're supposed to use it. Like at any given point in time, it's hard to get a lot of value out of aggressing with it. It doesn't have Brave, obviously, so if you attack with it, obviously you can't block with it, and if you block with it, you kind of have to float CP and use some strange breakable backups so you can break it like whatever time, which is just kind of like not something that Earth is particularly great at. You know, a lot of Earth's breakables are like Leo, which like it's very telegraphed when you're going to be using it. And yeah, we got like Miner and stuff like that, and then there could be some kind of like, you know, it works really well with the card that we're about to talk about, Ignis, but there could be some kind of things with that, but like I don't pretend to understand exactly what's going on with this card at the current point in time. I wouldn't be surprised if it like, you know, crops up, especially when, you know, Monster Deck's Mirror starts to take off a little bit. But I don't like fully understand it. Yeah. I will say though, it is very, very good that we lost Althea, because Althea would trigger this. Yeah. So yeah, there would have been, I'm not saying that, you know, Earth Wind would have been the total sauce just because of this card, but like that would be really annoying to deal with for sure.
Good point. Good point. So speaking of more backup destruction, here we have Ignis. I actually thought this was Noctis when I first saw it. I've not played through the supplementary episodes of 15, just the main game. So when I first saw the art, I was like, wait, that's Ignis? It kind of looks like Noctis. And then when I first read his effect, I wasn't super high on it, and not that because it wasn't good. It's just not me, right? This just isn't a card for my play style because I just don't like to break my own backups. However, now that we've seen the full set, there are a lot of backups that you kind of can self-break, and so I thought, this Cygnus guy could get you a lot of value, like if you are kind of getting these backups over and over again. And of course, Straight Break is one of the best effects you can have in the game, and yeah, he's a little more pricey than Robo-Lackbell, but he's also not tied to crystals, nor does he tie to Amaterasu. Granted, he can't target monsters like Robo can, and he doesn't have the inherent recursion that Robo can. But the more I thought about Ignis, the more I liked him. You kind of mentioned in the last video that the forward Ignis, the new one in Retainers, he's not really that great, so this could be a fun one to slot in. I'm looking forward to seeing people do some fun stuff with him. Obviously, if you're digging into anything like Ranpair or any other crazy backups that when you break them, surprise, you get this other great effect. Cool. And I'll probably let you mention the Star Sybil thing as well. Go ahead.
Right, yeah. So, there's a lot of text on the card. It's a very technical card. You do a lot. You perform a lot of game actions in a single enter the field, and you're probably pairing this, with your cards like Rampair or whatever, or other when backup is removed, do whatever kind of thing that's going on. Obviously, it works really well Star Sybil because you can break the Star Sybil, then Ignis triggers. You add the forward back, and then Star Sybil lets you play the forward, so you get a lot of customizability in your turn. And the same thing works with Rampair. So you break the Rampair, Ignis triggers, you get the forward back, and then so you can get the 11-4 that you're going to play off of Rampair, basically. And there's a lot of toolboxy, techie ability stuff going on there. I'm pretty into this card. I guess I should say again, cautiously optimistic. The card reads really well. It's just it hasn't the kind of deck that it's supporting isn't something that we've traditionally seen in the past 10 sets. It's something that's very successful. Rampair was obviously really, really powerful back in Opus 9. Yeah. It's been a while since we've kind of gone there, and I'm kind of I'm not sure about breaking my own backups and stuff like that. Obviously, the power level, it looks like it's there. It is just again, very technical. I guess the other thing to mention is we'll probably talk about it very, very briefly when we get. Actually, we talked about it very, very briefly. Sorry, with Prompto, but obviously this is also a retainer. You search it off the Noctis, you put the Prompto in, and Prompto works with it. You get to draw an extra card. There's some other stuff going there. Maybe there's a 3-color Rampair deck. Maybe it's just an Earth Wind deck, and you play your Miners and your Antlions and stuff like that, and kind of trigger and just have a lot of recursion. Ignis was the least used of the retainer names too, so obviously it's nice to get a playable card there. But this isn't really doing anything super super new for the retainer deck either. Yeah. You had recursion because you were Earth already, and this is kind of more of that. It's also more destruction when we already had the retainer, when we already had the fight effect that was coming out of Noctis. Yeah. So again, cautiously optimistic about this card, I guess.
We'll have to see. I know I don't want to break my backups, but I know there's people out there who will want to. So,
right.
Speaking of which, if you would like breakable backups, may I interest you in Ilfana? Ifalna. I actually have never pronounced it out loud before. Ifalna. When you're reading it just back in the day, you're like, that's what she's called.
Yeah.
So this is Aerith's mother, her adopted mother. And do you like playing Earth Forge from your break zone? Would you like to play one of any cost possible? This is your gal. Obviously, just kind of great on her own. Again, a theme we've seen with this. It's just a 2 CP backup. So at its worst, okay, 2 CP backup. Now I can start generating crystal points off of it. Or hey, if I really need that emergency one, awesome. It does limit it to your turn, but it doesn't limit it when in your turn. So you can do it in combat. So if there is some kind of surprise, this actually came out in combat and it did some field effect, that would be really cool. So mono Earth isn't really a thing, but I feel like you would at least put this in, or at least try it as a one of, right? Just for that surprise factor. But the question is, what are you bringing back with it? Robo-Lackbell, is he the big one? You can also target multi-Earth elements. So Prish, White Tiger, Lycene Nimbus. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have it's just a generically good card. We've had some of these cards before, Devout back in Opus 1 and like the White Mage, that kind of like they're tricky, get back to 4 cost or less backups. This one's a little bit more flexible. Obviously, the flavor is you're supposed to get the new Aerith with it.
Yeah.
That's like the flavor thing that is supposed to go on. I don't have a clear answer for like this is the card that we're really going to be getting like a good deal on. The one that I guess comes immediately to mind is, well, obviously this is going to trigger Ignis and stuff like that, so it's going to work with those, but retainers do have a problem getting like the Noctis onto the board consistently. So like I would probably consider playing this in the retainer deck if I was playing them, because it works with Ignis and because, you know, Noctis is such an important piece for that deck that you might consider doing that.
And he's always got a target on his back, so
exactly. Yes. Yeah. He just dies like every turn, I swear. It's just like the way the game is supposed to work.
Well, speaking of her daughter Aerith, here we have another 2-cost Earth Aerith who, you know, if without warp or without a way to cheat her in, she's just completely blank, which is not something you want at all. Yeah. My friend mentioned like Fenrir. He's like, oh, it's kind of fun. Like you Fenrir her in and then you get another forward back. But I was like, I don't know. Like if I'm putting in a 2-cost, I think I'd rather have the Opus 16 Legend Aerith that then like buffs the board. Right. So yeah, I don't know. I don't. This one's just kind of pack fodder to me. Do you see her differently?
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people were saying, you know, oh, like, this is a great Fenrir target. And I was like, yeah, but, like, we don't play Fenrir. Yeah. It's like not a good card at this point. So, I'm not super excited about this one either. I don't even think it's that good for L3. I mean, there's not a whole lot in the way of recursion, but if you were going to play it, that's where I would see it happening. But I don't think this one's making the cut in standard. Maybe something happens in the future and you get to play it for free off of like some really great effect, and then it would be really good, I guess. Like, you know, if there's like an Ursula that can get this back, then I could totally see this card like being good in the future. But right now, like with the options we have, it's just like Fenrir, Galoof, Phoenix. And I'm just like, nah, that's not where I want to be for that kind of card.
No, thank you. What about Master Chaos here? At first, I just kind of blew past this card when all the set had gotten revealed, but I've been thinking about him since then. There are, and I looked up, okay, what dark 4 costs are there? There's quite a few, 4 or less, a lot of good ones. You can go as old as a Galdez. Obviously, Kadaj is still good. We've got the new Xenos, like Ultimisia, Sephiroth. There are a lot of good targets for that. And it kind of gets around the brickiness of a dark card in that you don't ever have to have that turn later where you draw into it and then, now it's junking up my hand. No, he just brings it right out to the field. So I wonder if you see him early, of course. Obviously, the later the game goes, the more likely you are to draw into that card. But if you can see him early, I don't hate the idea of turn 1 or turn 2, whatever, chaos into whatever your dark thing is. As far as his action ability, if it said remove himself and 1 dark character, I would love it, because then again, you just chaos and you put that one other, but you need a second one. So, okay, are you putting 2 copies of Kadaj in? Are you playing Dark Emperor and you're trying to like make sure he's got enough targets for chaos? So like, I don't know how relevant that is, but just on his entry alone, if there's a specific dark character you're looking to play that's 4 or less, I think he's actually kind of cool. I kind of like him.
Yeah, so I'm pretty high on this card for L3, like very, very high on the card for L3. And then for Standard, I have mixed feelings because Xenos is just a good card, and we'll talk about Xenos in a little bit. But this card just tutoring out like your 1 or 2 copies of Xenos and just being able to do the Xenos thing again and again against like 13, that's like really powerful. You know, you get 2 9Ks, and one of them is Xenos, and you break the Vanille and stuff like that against 13. It's just a very, very powerful and consistent way to put that kind of anti-aggro strategy into your deck that otherwise does not really have anti-aggro into it. Now, you know, Standard is a very different game. When you're not playing against 13, it's pretty difficult to justify the deck slots required to make this work. You know, in L3, the card pool is just so much smaller. It's very, very small, and having search effects and consistency is very, very important. And while, you know, search effects are great for Standard too, the card quality is just so much higher that I'm not sure that this one really makes a cut. Now, I wouldn't be super surprised if we saw this kind of crop up every now and again as a couple, you know, like 1 or 2 slots in if there's like especially like a mono Earth deck, then, you know, I wouldn't be super surprised to see this, but I don't really expect us to, you know, build around it, and I definitely don't expect us to resolving the bottom effects, the remove itself from the break zone, because you have to remove your Xenoses from the break zone if you can do that. And then the Xenos already can cast itself with them from the break zone. So there's some like anti synergy there. I just mostly expect it to be like an anti 13 L3 card.
Yep. Fair. That's probably where we'll see it. So Leatherworker, we talked about those backups. Next we have Siran. I kind of tried to sell myself on him, but even just now as I was thinking about it, like if your goal is the whole crystal thing, especially with new cards like Materia and Spiritus, like we have ways to just consistently give you crystals. So while I appreciate he can generate them with his attacks, there's so much better spenders of them. Like, I mean, I'm not even sold on crystals anyway, but if I was going to play them, there's other cards I would want to play over this guy.
Yeah, the S ability is good, but that's basically all the card has going for it. And, you can't, like, make it so that you can use the S ability by using a crystal instead or something. If it had that kind of text, I would be a lot more interested in playing it, because then it'd be like an Earth Glaciella soft, but even then I would be a lot more excited to play it than what's here.
Well, what about our friend the Gigas here? I really like this artwork. Like, I don't know. I got a thing, I guess, for the little, like, chubby monsters are cute. And actually, I like his
underbite.
Yeah, right? Yeah, he's got the arr. He kind of got like a Wicket thing from Star Wars.
Yeah.
So what I do like is that he's not just the turn he comes in. He lasts until their turn as well. So he essentially says combat doesn't exist for one forward for one whole turn. And then paying 3 for 8,000... that's really not bad. Kind of the going rate for that is 4, which you could count 4 if you count his entry cost as well. It depends on how you want to see that, because, again, you could count that as its own separate thing. So, like, it's one of those cards that I don't think there's anything wrong with this card, but where are you going to put it? And is it just going to be a slots thing? And because his action ability specifically requires 2 Earth, does he have to go in Earth? Is it a little more risky to put him in, like, a normal monster water mix? So he's cool, but I'd be surprised if he showed up in Standard.
Yeah, there's just more important cards basically all around. The only place I could see it seeing play is if there's a Mira deck in L3, you got to play some amount of monsters, so like you got to pick the least bad ones basically. Yeah. But I don't see this ever making the slots, unfortunately.
More important cards, sir. You got it. Let me show you Kimari, awesome Guardian in Final Fantasy X, and let me tell you how important this card is. It's not at all, because it's terrible. I don't know why they hate this character. Like, okay, so first of all, it costs 5, and 5, especially nowadays with the strong multi-elements and 2 costs and 3 costs getting more and more powerful, 5 is a lot of CP. Like, if you're putting you need Bismarck level effects. You need something huge. So he's 5, he immediately does nothing. You can, like, protect another forward, but only from damage-based stuff. So, again, if they, like, break it, that doesn't matter. And then the idea is clearly that, he can, like, feed into himself, right? And he can protect himself. But not only do you have to discard a card, it has to specifically be an Earth card. And then it doesn't even completely protect the damage. It just, like, cuts it in half. I don't know, man. I love Kimari, and I've been waiting for that Kimari to fit into the Guardians, and I was like, oh, Kimari! And then I read it, I was like, oh, Kimari.
Yeah, there's an Opus 9 Cecil with an effect that's shockingly close to this, with the same power, but it costs 1 less, and is, like, basically unplayable. So, like, why did we make this card, I don't... Yeah. Bad. It's just all around bad. I don't even think it's good in draft or like seals. Maybe discarding an Earth card makes it okay. If it gained power, I'd be a lot more excited to play it in draft, I guess. But
Poor guy. All right, well, let's go digging for something better then. Here we've got a Miner. Miner was such an old, reliable backup back in Opus 5, man. It was such a great one to see in Scions and the whole Dataluma Cactar package. And this one kind of does something similar, not exactly. So we have the Reveal 5, which is kind of the cursed mechanic, and is arguably a little more cursed too when you're looking for backups, because generally that's like the least amount of card type you're playing in your deck, maybe with the exception of like monsters or summons. And then I do like that you can just break it later to draw a card. Again, this is one of those cards, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but the Reveal 5 mechanic, I've just been burned by it so many times, and I've tried it with Shadow, who wants to see a backup. I've tried it with Sarah, who wants to see a Moogle, usually a backup, and those two haven't come through for me. Is the Miner really going to be any different? I mean, I just can't believe your promises anymore.
Yeah, I'm a little bit higher on this one because it's a 3 cost instead of a 4. Like, if it was a 4 cost, then just like, well, why aren't we playing like any of the 4 cost backup searchers? is where I'd be, but because of the 3 cost, I'm a little bit higher on it. And it works really well with some of the other stuff that we appear to want to be doing. So like, there's the other Earth back, like obviously the ones that come in free if you have 3 or more Earth backups. So there's like with the Ignis thing going on, maybe there's like a 20 backup list again, and then it gets really consistent. So I ran the numbers on the hypergeometric calculator for this one, and this one is an 87% if you run 17 backups. So if you run more than that, it gets a little bit better. But again, 13% of the time, like missing is going to be pretty bad. Like you really just want to hit. I don't think it really matters what backups you're playing. So I could see maybe there's like a 17 backup deck that plays like 3 Shantotos or something like that, and then you play some of these cards that break your own backups or whatever stuff like that. You play some of the cycling backups. The 1 CP. I think it's Geomancer is the Earth one. Yeah, play some of those. Play the free backups. Stuff like that, and then maybe you just start cycling your backups like as quickly as you possibly can with the Ignis and stuff like that. And there's something cool to do with that. And this one also cycles itself. You don't have to go out of your way to break it like some of the other stuff does. So, I don't know exactly where we're going with this, but I really love backups. Like I love backups as a play style. So I'm excited to try it out. I love to curve out. Who doesn't love to curve out? It's just the best feeling ever. So I'm excited to try it. Again, cautiously optimistic. However, in L3, this is just a slam dunk card. You don't have odd cost cards very often, first of all, so that's just great. You don't have backup searching for the most part, so that's also just great. So yeah, I'm super excited for this one in L3. But also, I think there's definitely potential here for standard playability.
Awesome. All you aggro players out there, listen to Jared. Just slow down. Just take your time, curve out your backups. You're going to feel great. Promise you. You know what might also make you feel great is our legends. This is Cecil. Some fantastic art here that mirrors his water art. I was observing too. I love that he's looking, well, for me, he's looking to the left and then the other one's looking to the right. So I love that they're looking in opposite directions. But how does the card? Well, he technically doesn't do anything when you play him. He just comes in. You can play him cheaper for a certain cost, but it will do you a point of damage. But for a lot of players, that's a good thing. Hey, let me turn on my damage, X trigger, whatever. And then his action ability is clearly great. There's very little that stops action abilities in the game, so it pretty much just says, go search for that job Paladin Cecil and bring it right to the field. Well, they released a new water one that they clearly were thinking of, but a lot of people thought, ooh, I could play that Wind Cecil and then just slam out whatever else I want. Someone even mentioned the old Opus 2 Water Legend Cecil. And normally a lot of times I'll just be like, it's a special whatever, but clearly since this wants you to play a lot of Cecils, the special isn't irrelevant because if those cards are junking up your hand, you can turn them into something. So I do really like him. I'm always a little hesitant when a card doesn't do anything when you play it, and he does cost 5, but I mean, just surely bringing out those other Cecils just has to be so strong and worth it, right? Have you played with this card?
Oh yeah, I played a ton of this card. So we'll talk about it a little bit with Rosa and the other Cecil too. But basically, or maybe we should just talk about this now.
Sure.
Yeah. So like the other Rosa lets you play this off color, so you don't really have to play Earth. I have found it as just a little more consistent in general with Earth, but the other Rosa lets you draw every time you play a card named Cecil, right? So basically this Cecil, because it gets another one the next turn, is always going to get you 2 draws off the Rosa, and that just makes this card like much better. Also, it says you can pay Earth Water. I think a lot of people don't understand that this is how it works yet, but the Rosa lets you play that off color. So you get to pay that just by discarding a card, and that's been confirmed on Twitter.
Really?
Just so you know.
So you can pitch a single card and it fixes the whole thing?
Yes, you can just pitch a single card and it fixes the whole thing. And a lot of people have tried to tell me that I can't do that on Noxion, and I have to keep posting the Twitter link over and over again. But, yes, you can do that. That's in the FAQ on the Japanese site too. Right. But that makes it like way better. Yeah, obviously, absolutely. Right? The other thing is this card basically fully charges your TCP Rydia immediately. That's just like, very good. Like you just get to 6 immediately. It also protects it from stuff like Typhon, and that has just made playing against that card a total nightmare for me. It's just been awful. I really dislike playing against it right now. But so I think there's definitely some pretty high potential for this. I'm not sure what the deck looks like at the end of the day. I'm not sure if it's like Earth, Water, for not real. I'm not even sure if you play Rosa, to be honest, because if you're playing Earth, Water, then you can just play this, and you don't really need to draw the extra cards off Rosa. You know, you already have Rydia, and you're protecting the Rydia. So do you really need to draw extra cards off Rosa there? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's a 3-color because the new Palom, who we kind of glaze over, but I've kind of I found it to be very, very good with the Water Cecil. That's also good. So maybe there's a 3-color there, or maybe you just use Rosa to play the Palom off color. There's a ton of room for experimentation with this one, and I've had nothing but good experiences playing, you know, 4, 5, 6 copies of Cecil. The Water one is obviously the one that is the engine card. This is just kind of like the one that gets you into the the other ones and comes out a little bit cheaper than the other ones do. But yeah, just fantastic, great. I expect to see a bunch of it. I don't know if you necessarily need to slot 3 of this one into all of your 4 decks, especially if you're playing it off color like a Wind Water version or something like that. But in the Earth Water versions, at least, I expect to see a lot of this.
And I will give a bonus point too for the theme that literally his Dark Knight card becomes a Paladin card. Like, that's awesome. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, moving on with Sonnen. He's just a beater. If you have Melfi, then he gets 1k Brave, and then he's not a pure black belt. But I mean, that's still kind of a black belt, right? And then they've added quite a few of these, like, I don't know what you'd call them, auxiliary effects that, like, hey, once they're gone, they've done their thing, they can still give you some value from the break zone, so you can remove him in the Melfi and pay 2 to draw. I mean, I'd rather have that than not have that, but to me, like, the only time I could see you doing that is like, I have nothing else to do. All right, let me see if I can dig one card deeper. Right. And it's just, the other Sonnen is so good. And again, I know you have to go into Lightning for that one, but I really like that card with the back attack and the EX burst and the power switching. Like, I don't know why you would play this. Maybe they put this in here just for draft purposes, so Melfi would have a target. What do you think?
Yeah. I think that this is more or less to make draft playable. Like, people have been really upset about, like, you know, Lightning without Odin and like all of this, you know, Golbez without any Archfiends and stuff like that. And it's just like, come on, you know, like, throw us a bone, you know, stuff like that. I think this is mostly here for draft purposes. It's not totally unimaginable that this sees some amount of play in like L3, but even then, like, Earthwind isn't really the color combination that I foresee us being in unless you're playing Yuri and Chelinka, and at that point, like, you know, why are you playing this garbage? It's like, there's so many better cards to play in general. So yeah, I just don't. I don't think it's there for L3. But yeah, draft. You know, hey, 4 speed 9k Brave, nothing to sniff at.
Yeah. What I heard there was that you wanted more Earth Category 7 cards. Yeehaw! Giddy up, cowboy, because we got Tifa. Oh boy. So I have seen so many different opinions on this card. Obviously, a Brave 9k can't become dull. Awesome. And she has this cool infinite attack that, as long as you're paying with backups, so of course people thought of No and these other backups that just give you your power, and everyone wants to live the dream of your field is wide open and Tifa just bam, 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 and just knocks you out in 7 in one turn, which will be cool to see, and I'm sure someone's going to do it, and it's going to be awesome. However, I do have some reservations about this card. It doesn't inherently have haste. However, it's a card that's very well supported to have haste, so I don't think that's a huge issue. It does make you discard when it enters. And I know people, anytime there's a card like this that say discard, they say, well, you just play your hand out. And do you know how vulnerable of a position it is if you say, I have nothing, do whatever you want to me? And then the other thing is, too, unlike something like Ravana, which at least took reduced damage, she doesn't have any special protection or, like, on-attack abilities. So if they have a Warrior of Light or another 9k, they go, oh, okay, step it in front of Tifa. Where's your plan now? There's your big plan. So, like, man, I can see the potential, and I know someone is going to get me caught me with my pants down and bam, just knock me out, you know, with 5 hits, but is she going to be competitive? I'm cautiously... Am I cautiously optimistic? Maybe I'm cautiously pessimistic? I'm not sure. Tell me about Tifa.
Yeah, it's just a weird card that pulls you in a lot of different directions. You know, you want to play all of this, like, backup reactivation and Earthwind, but you want to give her haste, so you want to play it in Earthfire. You want to search it, so you want to play Elfie and play it in Earthfire. But the backup name is also Tifa, so it's like, it's very, very weird card that pulls you in all sorts of different directions. Maybe there's like a weird, combo deck. I was thinking about, like, well, is this just like a new finisher for Tilica, basically?
Yeah.
Like, do you ever just want to like play the Tilica deck, vomit a bunch of like zoos and stuff like that onto the board, infinite loop, and then finish with Tifa? Maybe, like I'm not really a Tilica aficionado. I'll leave that up to the combo the super big combo players, but I would not be surprised if there is a deck with this card, but like it's going to take a long time to hammer out all the details, I think, and actually get it into a competitive state. And once it's into a competitive state, your game plan is very, very telegraphed, and I'm not convinced that there are ways that like there's counterplay in just like everything, right now. And there's counterplay built into the card. Like you can't have a hand, and it's only 9K. So like, yeah, I will die to it. It's gonna happen. There's going to be times, especially like it's just a fine finisher as like a attack 3 times kind of card. But yeah, I'm not super sold on it as just like a generically playable card. So we'll have to wait and see, I think.
Someone show me the cowboy sauce. I'm sure it's out there. So next we have Noctis, so he's kind of interesting, kind of your generic Earth effect on entry. You kind of buff something, give it Brave. However, then he has this unique effect that at first I kind of dismissed because I missed that last line of text that he actually permanently gets a power buff. So maybe they have this idea that like this card keeps returning, and then you've got a 15,000 power Noctis.
But it'll die, so it'll lose the first buff.
Oh, right, but it would keep the one it returns with, right? When he re-enters the field?
Yeah, so it'll be a permanent 9K basically. Because once it dies the next time, it'll lose it.
I thought it would just stack and he'd get that forever.
No, yeah. Yeah.
Well, there went my excitement for this card. I'll try to finish. The thing is, though, you have to give up a character for that, right? Something which again, I thought, well, he's a retainer. Maybe with Ignis, there's you break this back up. Ignis triggers, and then the Noctis comes back. But that means you're also giving up Noctis. Damn it! I thought he stacked infinitely. All right, get him out of here. Tell me about him.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's a like a mono Earth version of this deck. It does work again. Obviously plays very, very well with Ignis. There is some like pretty immediate and obvious counterplay with breakzone removal though. Like you're gonna sack a backup and try to get back and forward with Ignis and get the Noctis back. It's like, well, Mist Dragon just ruins your whole day. Even the new Wind Edge. Because your opponent can kill the Noctis on their turn and then use the Edge's ability at instant speed, they'll just remove Noctis and whatever you're targeting with Ignis. So I wouldn't even say that I'm cautiously optimistic about this one. I think that it's pretty hard limited to a very, very specific archetype. You have to be playing that backup, break your own stuff. Will it be really, really good in that archetype? I'm not even sure, because it is just kind of like a really strange looking card. The big thing about this card for me is, eventually maybe we get a way to, sacrifice your own stuff, and that's something we want to do, and it will work really, really well because you can, sacrifice the Noctis, and the Noctis sacrifices something else, and then you trigger maybe a bunch of abilities, This is something that, we see is it's never a good idea to completely turn your mind off of these cards and forget that they exist, because MTG has taught us that these kinds of effects are really problematic once you get a big enough of them going in the same kind of deck. However, I don't really see it besides the surface level stuff that is already written on the card with Ignis for the time being.
Fair enough. And next we have our crystal backup. Touched on those. Here we got this guy's just a great big phony. It's fake. Man, so someone somewhere thinks that, if you have just this big old body that you can make it cheap, but it's got to have downsides. You got to restrict it. Now, generally, stuff like that is at least good in Draft L3 where there's less removal. But this guy, he has you need to see him early, right? What if you draw this card and you're on damage 5? He's not going to he literally doesn't do anything. He'll never be able to attack or block. I get they like this theme of the big body, but they just need something else if they wanted it to be standard competitive. An on attack trigger, and on block trigger, something the fact that even against 13, so what, I put him out and then they run me down first and then he can finally block. I don't know. I'm not digging this card.
Yeah, obviously if you play it like turn 1 against 13, they're gonna groan a little bit. Like, it's obviously, you know, there is some potential there as just a 2CP 10k, but yeah, the hurdle is yours to climb, you know. The big, you know, synergy card that I've seen a lot of people talk about with this one is, you know, Porum. You know, you blank it, it doesn't have the restriction on it anymore. And like, well, but then it doesn't have Brave, and then I have to dole my big 10k guy and he's on a blocker. I don't, and not only that, Porum is already good against like all of the aggro decks. Like, why did you need to play like a bunch of more cards that do it? And also, you're in Earth Water, so like, what's the, like, what are you doing? You know, at that point, in my opinion. So, yeah, I don't really see this one working out. Maybe there's some, you know, niche L3 stuff that wants to have this kind of effect, but you know, we saw Xenos, we saw Chaos. Like, do you really need this kind of like janky version of like anti-aggro card when you could just be playing 9Ks that also like break your opponent's stuff? You know, I don't know about that. So yeah.
All right. Next we got a little wolf action. One of my favorite summons from Final Fantasy VI, and it's nice to see 6 get some more summons because they have cards that want to see a bunch of 6 cards. Well, we got 2 new 6 summons for that. However, note that even though casting this will trigger the 5-cost lock to reveal, he can't actually get the Fenrir if it's the card revealed. Same with the Setzer, because I think it only gets characters. Nonetheless, how good is this card? Well, if it chooses a 4 or 2 or less, it's completely free, which is awesome. So the first thing I thought of was Rydia, and then it just says can't be chosen by your opponent's summons. How good is that? Well, depends on the deck. Against water, awesome. Wind and ice, probably pretty decent if they're trying to Dryad or something else. If they're really ability heavy, doesn't do much there, but like, again, it's one of those cards, it doesn't read bad, but it is a little situational, and slots, and I know like those Rydia decks already are so tight. What would you drop for this Fenrir that in the right matchup is huge? Like, again, against water, I think Rydia would love this. That like, nope, you're not bouncing her. Nope, you're not bouncing her. But what if you don't run into that? So I don't know. Like, I just like it. I do like the card. I just don't know how prominent it will end up being.
Yeah, I'm kind of landing the same place here as we did with what was the name of that ice monster? I can't remember. I'm sorry.
Oh, the Cerulean Drake?
Or... No.
Wicked Mask.
Wicked Mask. There you go. Sorry. Yeah, I kind of run into the same thing as Wicked Mask here. It's like obviously a really, really strong card in the right situation. And it'll end up in those kinds of like the last 10 slots of any given deck once the meta has kind of, you know, taken shape.
Yeah.
Then you evaluate like whether or not, you know, is my card going to be dying to summons or not, you know? And the other thing is, you know, it does work really, really well for Rydia, but Rydia doesn't need to play free summons because it can already cast like really, really big summons or whatever. So it's like, it is kind of like a weird card. And then, you know, I tried making, you know, like an Earth Water Summoner deck, and I'm like, well, but I'm not protecting anything with this one. It's never coming out for free. You know, I'm having to pay for it. So, you know, I'm not really sure how I'm supposed to slot this or, you know, really do anything with it. I don't pretend to understand exactly what this is for right now. I hope that it becomes more obvious as time goes on, because the card does appear to be very, very powerful. You know, it is obviously really good when it lines up. I just don't see it quite yet.
Yep, that's very fair. Well, what about Mira here? The Monster Mash is coming back. Mira, of course, gets so many good monster cards. This one has an EX Burst. It is the Reveal 5 mechanic, and monsters... you know, 17 backups is one thing. I don't know if I've ever seen 17 monsters in a deck. Maybe some random ones, but generally. So you got to have a lot of monsters to hit off of this. However, I love her action ability. If you have a key monster, Biblos, Scale Toad, you know, Typhon, Atomos, whoever you want to pick, you know, Blue Worm, Echidna, the fact that she can say, nope, you're not killing it this turn, I really like that. Of course, she's also a 3K, so it's pretty easy to maybe just flick her away anyway. Like, neat little card. Is she the best Mira? I don't know about that.
Yeah, I don't even think they're the best. Earth Mira, you know, Reveal 5, Curse Mechanic, EX Burst, you know, a nice little buffer there, kind of make the card a little bit more playable than it might otherwise would be. But, you know, it's got an awful name. Not even the best Mira in the set. Not even the best Earth Mira. Reveal 5 for a card type that doesn't really end up wanting to do that very often. You know, you don't really want to have enough to put this in the 90% range. That's like, you're talking about like 18, 19 monsters. And, maybe there's a monster mash, but in the monster mash, wouldn't you want the other mirror? It's kind of problematic. I had a lot of people try to sell me on this card, like, this card is just broken. This card is just really, really good. And I'm just like, I don't get it, man. Sorry. Yeah, it's, I can't sign off on this one.
Yeah.
In my opinion. So.
Sorry, Mira. We'll get to a better version of you later. All right, here's the Mega Sisters. Maybe neat as if there was ever a sideboard where, they're playing pure summons and haste. Let me put the Mega Sisters in there, but otherwise too expensive and too situational.
Yeah, I do think there's a pretty niche case for it in L3. It works. Obviously, works very, very well against 13.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't get the haste. They lose the haste, and then if it lives, it can't be chosen by all of like the Bahamut's and stuff like that they're generally using to kill your stuff. And then you can discard all of your extra summons to kind of slowly pick down on the hope of any and stuff like that. However, even if the lightning doesn't have haste, they still get to hit you like 2 times. So you kind of have to go first for the card, and it's I'm not really feeling it. But some people are swearing by this already on Twitter, so only time to tell.
Yeah. Next, we have a card I thought we'd already gotten. This is Leo. Very similar to his full art from Opus 13. But I think this one maybe has an eye patch. Like, that's the difference. I was comparing him. So I was
He's more black.
Yeah, right? There's a darker edge to this Leo. It's just a straight anthem for all your category FFC forwards. And then you can search for one of 4 or less played onto the field. So I looked up the list. I was like, well, what do we have for options here? So obviously the main choice is you play Hjörg from Opus 13. And you got a Brave 9K. What? And it doesn't do anything else. No, that's a terrible choice. Probably one of the Yuris is going to be the best option. Goldez is out there too. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna play it with. I just like we talked about it with Cellskin. You get the Chelinka, you discard, you get the Yuri, and boom, everybody's big. It's like, and everybody claps, and it's a great day. It does. The card does exactly what you think it does. Like, it's a very simple, understand card. You get the Yuri and Chelinka, and then they never die. I think that's the end of the story. So I do think it's very very strong card. I would be very surprised if this didn't see play. Obviously, if Yuri Chelinka just sucks as like an archetype and a deck type, then we're not gonna play it. But we'll get into it a little bit with the Lightning Mirror too. But I do think that it works very well with that card as well, because you're not gonna play the Mirror off of that very often. But what is going to happen, I think, is you're going to have the Yuri and the Chelinka, and then you're going to have all of these like Epitaph and like all of these extra FFCC cards, and nothing to search with them because you already have the Yuri and the Chelinka. So in that case, you're going to want to get the Mira and then discard the Mira, and you can play all these monsters because you don't really need other forwards for the most part, right? There's not a whole lot going on there, and Mira will get the extra 1k off of this, and you can kind of work with your monsters and your Chelinka pair and get some extra removal out of that. So I do think that it will be a deck, and I expect to see a lot of this going forward. If your Chelinka end up being playable, obviously if they're not, then we're not going to see it.
Sure. All right. So I guess we'll see what the hopes and dreams write on them. That's it for Earth. So let's move on to Lightning, starting with a card I'm not super fond of, Assassin, which pretty much says pay 4 to immediately summon me and then kill me and then break 1 forward, which is fine. That's kind of the standard rate to pay 4, but it's, I don't know. I'm just not really digging this one.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty, very, very niche argument that, like this is searchable with Diana and Stiltskin. And, Wind Lightning and like Lightning has kind of seen an uptick in these like ping effects, So maybe it's just like got the right stats, the one CP to work. If you have to pay the 2 Lightning and 1, like that just feels really bad. Like we don't want to put these kinds of cards in our deck very often, but it could be worse for sure. There definitely options in the pool to make this card playable in standard. I think very, very unplayable in L3, so just not enough to support it.
Well, let's check out the Louisoix twins. Or the Levalure twins, I should say. Louisoix was their grandfather. So here we have Alice. It kind of competes with the other Alisei. This one is a little weaker power-wise, but it does have just, you can grab one of your best Scions, slap it right onto the field. I think most people thought of Y'shtola, whether you go into the fire version or you just do the Opus, what was it, 16, 17 Legend? That one's still quite good. The power reduction, it's got a board wipe, which you can do too. And then maybe that's all you care about. Like her water effect, I have a feeling it's going to sneakily come up more than you think it will. It's clearly meant to work with the Alphino, but I think even just, Scions generally is a deck that wants to just go in and start beating you. So I think the fact that, oops, surprise, you actually didn't have that extra blocker you thought you did might be more relevant. So is there any world where you're playing the old Alisei, or is this just the new sauce? I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be necessarily surprised if we saw, like, 4 or 5 Alisei, but this one is definitely the 3 of. Like, this is the one that you slot first, and then you worry about the other slots later, in my opinion, because there's just such a huge difference between adding back to your hand and just immediately playing to the field. Yeah. The tempo difference is just really, really huge, and I think anybody who's tried this deck out already just immediately understand. Like, just like a gut feeling thing is like, oh, this is just like way better than the other one. But that's not to say the other one doesn't have any uses, but yeah, the things that I see mostly coming out of this is there's the Fire Alphanome. Obviously, that one, when it gets played by an ability, you get to search for any card, any character in your deck, excuse me. That's obviously really, really strong with this. You don't even have to be in Fire because you're getting out of the deck, so, and it works obviously with Grahatia really, really well. I think I would be tempted to not play Fire Lightning for the most part. Obviously, there's some synergy there with Hien, and you can get some really, really quick kills with it. Yeah. But I think where this deck is more likely to land down is as a nice little mid-range deck that can cover lots of different options. Can be very, very aggressive, or it can be more slow and controlling. I'm not particularly sold on 7 CP fan crid doing all this stuff. I've seen some people try to do that. I think I'm actually leaning more towards just like either a control version with lightning water that doesn't really rely on the fan crid, or maybe, mono lightning, you're just gonna, haste them out kind of thing. I think it's very, very reasonable because you don't actually have to pay lightning costs for the non-lightning cards. Yeah. You don't have to pay fire for the Alphino. You don't have to pay, whatever for the Y'shtola. So I think it definitely could end up being a mono lightning deck, or, water, fire, water, lightning. Those are other options. There's just so many things that you could do with the deck that is very, very flexible, and I expect to see a lot of it.
Excellent. Most excellent. Well, we do have Angeal next. I probably am not really going to try soldiers much this set, but this is a pretty easy cost to hit because he counts himself, so you just need one other soldier, whether that's backup, whether that's your buddy Zach, and then 4 or less, that's pretty relevant. There's still some 5 and higher costs hanging out, but there's a lot of really relevant stuff 4 or less. So I do like his entry effect, and then again, anytime you have an action ability, oh, he's going to die, I'll just get rid of him anyway and give something a power buff. So if you're going into soldiers, I think this is a good card for it.
Yeah, I think there's just an obvious 1 or 2 of an Ice Lightning too, because Restrictor is a soldier. Yeah. Which is kind of a flavor fail. Honestly, it's kind of a flavor fail that it works like this, but I think it's much more likely that we see him with, Light Cloud, searching this card and then immediately playing this card will resolve it. So, and Ice Lightning is already playing, 1 to 2 Light Clouds pretty regularly. So, Light Cloud, Restrictor, well, isn't Angeal just a good card at that point, So, I think the bottom text, I'll put it into the break zone just forward to give it plus 3k. I think that's going to be surprisingly relevant in going forward. We've seen a lot of this whole attacking yourself is actually not really that big of a cost when it's going to die anyways, and those kinds of things are surprisingly relevant. It becomes very difficult to block your other guys when you can just sack off the Angeal to plus 3k them and stuff like that. So, obviously not an all-star card, but one of those, a single brick to make the brick wall of Ice Lightning is what this is, in my opinion.
One more brick on the wall. Hey, it never hurts to have another one. Speaking of which, what about Mr. Astinian here? This is our Lightning Legend. So this is like, for me, this is like Warp done correctly. It's as short as possible. It's only one. Only costs a single lightning. And then he gets a great effect when he comes in off of Warp. But even without the Warp, you can just go, all right, Astinian, do you immediately have Amaterasu? Okay, well then here's this 18,000 power first striker, so I'm going to deal you a point of damage or kill something. Like, there's no other alternative for that. So yeah, I love this guy. I hope he's as good as he reads. A small disappointment, he's not Slash Dragoon, but maybe they just ran out of space on the job bar. But hey, he does work with the Scion. So what do you think of Mr. Estinian here?
Yeah, I'm pretty big on that card in general. It's just pretty strong overall. Great deal. Obviously, you're getting like a big, fat, hasty guy that can attack twice and is more or less unblockable on like turn 1 or 2, kind of thing is when you really start warping this out. Great way to use your floating CP. And I think an undersold note on the card is that there's the Water Eureka that came out that requires you to have a remove from play card. That card obviously works really, really well with warp cards. And I think it's a nice little flavor buff there that you can just kind of like warp this and then immediately play your Eureka and kind of get the ball rolling there.
Absolutely. Well, what about Mr. Kadaj here, man? I kind of couldn't believe this was a 4 cost. I was like, what? But the dark version's a 4 cost, and that's like infinitely stronger. Granted, it is dark, but if this thing had like back attack, I might be a little more sold because it would be like an upgraded form of Janai, but just as he's written, I'm just not feeling it.
Yeah, I think it's a draft card.
Yep.
That's where I am.
Well, it sounds like we need more Scions then. How about Mr. Grahatia making his first appearance? So I have built a Scions deck. I haven't tested it at all. And I have to admit, there was a bit of a moment of pause where I was like, okay, I have to get a standard unit for Graha. What do I put in there? I'm looking at, there's actually, like, in these colors. I got to go kind of far back for one that I, like, really want. Because, unfortunately, one of the backups is FFTA. We're going to see here in a moment. Nonetheless, but maybe you don't care about the 3K. I care because I don't want him to die to Amaterasu. But maybe you're just like, you know what? You play him. You get whatever the best Scion is. It could be that Estinian we just saw. Maybe it's Alice, which combos into the Y'shtola. Maybe it's Y'shtola. Like, his options are pretty darn endless. So, if you're playing Scions, there's no way you're not playing Graha.
Right. Yeah. This is the card that really sells me on Scions as a competitive archetype. Like, if I'm playing it, this is the thing that I'm really excited to have. And there's the whole like the category 14 standard unit is required to be in the deck. But you look at the list of like water, fire, and lightning category 14 standard units, and it's pretty good. Pretty acceptable, all things considered. There's a lot. There's ones that give haste. Yeah, that's great. Like the in color and stuff like that. So, I think that it's pretty easy to get the 10k stat line here. And they're like, look at Fake. We're playing a 2 CP 10k that has downsides, but Graha is a 3 CP 10k that also gets you like a bunch of like free cards and stuff like that. So it kind of translates to being a 1 CP 10k in some surgeons, and it's just like, I think this card is pretty great, and I would expect to see this in every Scion deck, obviously. So
speaking of that standard lightning unit, here's our illusionist. I think this card could be sneaky good. I'm trying to think of so in Scions, I put a copy in Scions because I was like, well, when you do that Y'shtola wipe, sometimes, again, you got a Warrior Light, he's 10k, he's not going to die to it. Well, now it'll kill it. Or what if you're doing Wind Lightning and you're playing like that number 128? So now it's not a 7k hit to the board, now it's a 9k hit. Okay. Maybe you're playing Lightning Fire with Squall. Suddenly that 4K, it's looking like 6K. Now, granted, you have to lose a backup for it, and it is super specific, but I guess I want to be hopeful for this. Maybe it's fodder. How do you see it?
Not for standard. maybe in L3 I could definitely see, there's some wipey type cards. Does work really well with the multi Y'shtola. You get 2 6k pings instead. And, you're not as picky about your backups in L3 because there's just less good ones in general. So, maybe I could see that working on L3. Probably not standard playable, but
we'll keep hoping. Well, we kind of talked about some action abilities. We just talked about one. This is the Emperor. And I have complained for a while now that, man, these action abilities are out of control, whether they're the Rydias or the Twins or the Altheas or the, take your pick, whoever. Well, finally, we have a card that says, okay, let me do something about all these action abilities. Unfortunately, it's not a stop or a cancel, it's a tax. And again, we've touched on taxes before. Now, granted, this is 2. So again, all those action abilities that are free, suddenly they cost 2. Will that matter? Now, the nice thing, too, is if you kill this card, he can essentially, assuming there's more left in the deck and you haven't drawn them all like I would, you can, okay, here he is again. I'm going to tax you again. Pay it another time. Jared, I want this card to succeed so well, but we know how taxes are, and I've seen people with taxes in the past just say, okay, well, I'll spend the extra 2 once. It's gone. Now I'm going to do whatever I want. How do you see the Emperor performing?
It is nice that you have to pay the tax up front kind of thing, kind of like Cecil does, where it's like, well, I can, first I'll check and then I can respond to it.
Yeah.
However, I'm not particularly sold on this. Like if we get into the point, where Rydia is just out of control, am I going to be happy to see this card in the deck? Yeah, but if I'm in Lightning, don't I already have Ixion?
Yeah.
Like, don't I already have the theoretical answer to all these problems in the first place? And in that situation, I'm a little less convinced on the Emperor being like the defining meta card or anything like that. It will be, I think, a nice buffer for as an option, for Lightning-based decks to have against these kinds of things. But I wouldn't expect to see it out of the gates, and I wouldn't expect for it to just like randomly show up until we've seen the action abilities get out of control.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, it sounds like you need a card with more action abilities, sir. Here's Shadow Dragon. Dude, I love this card. First of all, this art is just awesome. Oh, so, Amano makes him look so cool. He looks so badass. And what I like about this is that the Golbez, a buddy was talking to me about this. He's like, yeah, but you got to play it with Golbez. I was like, I don't think you do. I think that's just icing on the cake. Like, I think I'm happy to play it, break anything of 3 cost, and then I have this very strong monster that we've seen for these that it doesn't matter these 3,000 power. The point is he just sits there to the side until he's ready to go in, like you see like in all the water monsters, but he doesn't even kill himself. So any little opportunity you get, I can sneak in, boop, Shadow Dragon. And again, I think Golbez is then just the icing on the cake that you essentially could replay him. Like 3 or less is a pretty wide, there's a lot of forwards and relevant forwards that hit. So I love this guy. I hope he's as good as I think he is in my mind, because I just think he's so cool.
Yeah, I think that this card individually is great. I think you touched on all the reasons that it's really good. I'm having a little bit of a problem with what Golbez do I really play to maximize the value on this card? And it's like, well, in Wind Lightning, I have so many good things to do. And I'm not saying that this card isn't good for Wind Lightning. It probably is very good. It's a monster. It helps you get in damage. It comes in for free, basically. And Golbez, there is a Wind Lightning, but like, the slots are so tough, it's like, do I really expect this card to shine like really, really great as like a new pillar of any deck? No, but it is just like another, again, it's one of those bricks that, you kind of need these kinds of cards to make a really great deck. And obviously if the conditions line up, it'll go in there for sure.
Well, and if you're trying to add more bricks to a wall, you know what you need is a captain like Core who... Why? It's 10 cards. 10 cards, and he doesn't even come in active. I don't even know what to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't even think we can draft this card because 10 cards is a quarter of your deck in draft. It's just like too many. So, I don't know.
Yep.
I don't know.
Moving on. Weaver, we talked about those earlier.
Sure.
Johnny, so Lightning has had a lot of these like 4 cost, you can get something back. We've had the Clan Gully. You've had cards as old as Opus 1 Sage. Johnny is just kind of the next best version of it, and then he can also sack himself later to get another recursion with a 7 character. Yeah, I mean, just clearly a generically good card. I don't know if he goes in Ice Lightning. There tends to be a lot of 7 in there, so maybe he is worth it. But yeah, just nothing really special to say about him. Just good generic backup recursion.
I think in standard Ice Lightning, it's too difficult to fit it in. We have Reeve Kaseth, President Shinra the Cisne, and Restrictor Nero. So like, there's just not. I don't think there's any slot for this in there. But it's definitely not a bad card there. It is a nice option to have of the Light Cloud. So it could be definitely like a one of in there if you manage to sneak in the room for it. And in L3, I think this card is very, very important for that deck because it lets you get back your Rufus and stuff like that, where you have a little bit more time where you can actually use the action ability. The game isn't just like over on like turn 6 or whatever like it is in the standard a lot of the time. So yeah, I think in L3, very, very important card. In standard, not as important, but not unplayable by any means.
Yeah. Next we have Sephiroth. I do appreciate the fact that they put the other than Sephiroth on his text, so that way, just in case
Right.
he comes in and there's no other forwards, he doesn't have to kill himself. If this was Warp 2, I might actually like it, because Pain 1, yeah,
Right.
you have to wait 2 turns, but then you can get rid of anything. Like, I don't think that's bad, but of course I never want to hard cast this for 7, especially when it can die to Amaterasu. And as we've said, like 3 is just so long. It's such a long. You're gonna be dead before then. You probably even in standard. Like, go ahead.
Right. Yeah, I think the only potential case for this card is, Vayne decks. You really need these Warp 3 for 1s are a pretty good deal when you play Vayne, because you warp the Warp 3 card for 1, and then you play Vayne, you remove a counter, draw a card, and then the next turn it loses a counter, and then Vayne triggers immediately, and then it comes in. So you kind of make it a pseudo Warp 1, and it triggers the Vayne, and I think that's what they want you to do. Does that actually work? It's pretty sketchy, like Vayne requires a lot to go in its way. Definitely viable in L3, I think, as a win lightning strategy. Obviously there's like, Charlotta and Sophie and like these other good cards that work for the warp deck there. In standard, bit of a tougher sell, but not completely out of the question.
Yeah, that's fair. More 7 characters on the way. We have Chadley. I actually quite like Chadley's old backup version.
Right.
This one, so at first I totally blew this off, but I think the one thing is because Ixion I think is like the lightning summon I thought of. So if you're going against Rydia Twins or 13 or something where it's like, I need Ixion now, the idea that you could put Chadley down turn 1, you get a backup, and you go get that Ixion, I think that is probably worth it. But other than that situation, I don't know why I would play this.
Yeah, I mean, having these discard ETB discard a card search is just so much better than 4CP search.
Yeah.
Because it lets you filter your hand a lot more consistently when you have lighter dark cards in the deck. So I think very, very specifically in Ice Lightning, it's possible this card sees one of, because Light Cloud can search this, and then this can search Ixion, and that's like something you're very interested in doing. Additionally, Chadley can help you discard the Light Cloud that you don't want to play. The other one is Chaos Arc, Earth Lightning. You have six dark cards in your deck. You need to have some amount of filtration to make that viable. And in that specific case, obviously, you'll search anything just to get the dark card.
Yeah.
Right. So, in that specific case, I do think it's very possible. Chadley, nice little additional one of for those 2 decks.
Fair enough. So, well, let's keep on the lightning summon theme. Well, actually, there's the ninja. That's a crystal generator. We'll go past those.
Yep.
And then Fusoya is who I wanted to talk about. At first I was kind of like, is cute, but where does he go? But then I started thinking, well, I don't know. What if you make like Seymour and Fusoya and Chadley, and you've got kind of this little lightning summon theme? What does it amount to? Mm-hmm. I don't know. Maybe an Odin package, but he's cute. And again, I like an EX burst. That's never a bad thing. I don't know where he would go, but I like the card. What do you think?
And I like this one a lot in Wind Lightning cast variations, because you have so many cheap summons. You can cast Chocobo or Alexander or Asura or the other Chocobo or whatever it is for free with the bottom text. But that's just mostly gravy, right? What you're really playing this for is ETB draw card. Yeah. That's it. It's just a nice little cheap little cast. A 1 cast. Obviously, you can do the same thing if you have the Water Rose on the forward, because you can just completely ignore the color. So it's going to work potentially in those kind of, if you make a mono 4 deck, right? If you're playing that kind of archetype, definitely a nice little cheap cast that can get you a little bit of extra value if you're interested there as well.
Yeah. Next, we have Behemoth. I actually kind of like this guy. Like, thinking of him compared to the Assassin, 7,000 versus 3,000 is a lot more relevant. Like, there are a lot of forwards that can take down. And then later, you can chump block with something small, a Purim or whatever else, and then finish it off with the Behemoth. So because of that, I actually like this guy way better than the Assassin. Slots are always a tight thing, but Lightning doesn't also have a ton of monsters that, it really wants to play. So I think this guy could end up showing up.
Yeah, it's pretty rare for a lightning monster to not have 1,000 restrictions on it. Right. So I think it's already better than a lot of the options that we already have. Obviously, it's not as good at killing, Rydia as the Thunder Drake and stuff like that. But it is also a pretty good food for Mira.
Yeah.
So you deal the 7k, and then The bottom effect is a little unwieldy. It's obviously not bad, but it's a little unwieldy. But you can just eat. You can use it to eat Mira, and or sorry, you can use it as food for Mira, and then Mira comes in and does her thing. And yeah, I think that there's a pretty low floor for this card. It just always does what it says on the card. It's obviously really good at killing Rufus and stuff like that. Yeah. So I imagine that this will be one of the more reliable lightning monsters that we see getting played.
And never bad to have more of those. Well, you mentioned Mira, so come on down, Mira. Let's bring her out of the curtain. This is a lightning legend. This card, I love all the text on this card just because it makes me think. And it makes me think of the great and the bad. I love the idea that we just haven't really had anything like this, that like any time one of your forwards comes in, boom, I'm killing it immediately, just like as a reaction to it entering. However, it also obviously doesn't stop any auto abilities, and discarding a monster from hand, how many monsters do you have to put in your deck so that you reliably have a monster in your hand? Or maybe you just pair her with stuff that lets you keep recurring monsters. I then do like that you can revive her, but again, then that requires a monster on the field. So you need one from her hand to use her effect, and then you need one from on the field to revive her. That being said, like, it's just such a neat effect that I want to see this card do well. I don't know if it will. I'll be cautiously optimistic, like you said. What do you think, Amira?
Yeah, I am huge on this card. This is like probably my favorite card out of the set so far. I think it's just so cool. Yeah. It's colorless, but also you can just auto search it and probably work in mono lightning, if you want to, if that's your jam or whatever. Goes in the Eureka deck. It's definitely got, the card power required to make new decks become a thing. So you definitely want to build around it, but also it just works when you play, a good handful of monsters, and I think the real selling point for me, at least, the real selling point of this card is that there's such a huge difference in the amount of knowledge that you, as the Mira player, have, and your opponent has as the player playing against Mira. Now, obviously, we don't play like 20 monsters, right? You don't have just like a bunch of monsters sitting in your hand at any point in time that you can just boom, 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 like kill all of your opponent's stuff with Mira, right? But because your opponent doesn't know how many you have, or even if you have one, it's just very, very difficult to play into the Mira, and it's very paralyzing, very, very difficult to get around it. Like, if I'm playing, for example, like mono wind, like, well, I'm like, I need to start casting, but am I safe to play this Rosa into this Mira that's sitting here, right? Or, I'm playing forward, like, I can't play, like, obviously, I can play the Rydia before the Mira comes down, but I can't play Rydia into the Mira at this point. Like, it's very, very risky, so it creates all of these different play patterns. It's very difficult to be on the opposite side of the table for this card. And I think that is the real selling point of this card and the reason I'm so excited to play it.
Nice. Awesome. I'm curious to see how it pans out. Next, we have Ramu. It'll sound like I'm being negative on this card, but I'm going to compare it to Opus 6 Ramu because that's just what it made me think of. It's got this modal. So in some ways, this is direct improvement. That one had a cost restriction on what it could dull. This can dull anything. That one had to target an active forward for damage. This just damages anything. And then they can both give a forward haste. But again, that one was restricted by lightning forwards, right? And this one's one cheaper. But damn, it deals less damage, and again, 5k, 7k, that can be relevant, and it can't hit monsters, which was like one of the reasons that card kind of saw a resurgence. So there's nothing wrong with this Ramu, but I was kind of surprised. It was like, oh, I don't know if I want to even play this over the old Ramu still, though. So like, again, all the text on this card is fine. I guess I was just, I don't know, I guess I wanted more from the new Ramu.
Yep, I think you're going to have to start picking and choosing your lightning summons pretty soon. You can't just like, but like, so Ice Lightning was running like Ramu 1 because it kills all of the ones in 2 CPs that basically sell the deck, and Ixion because, it has such a huge problem versus 13 and, like Rydia and stuff like that. This card obviously doesn't work for that same use case scenario. However, it is also really like hasting Rufus. That's pretty good, like that's something that you want to do, or hasting Physalis if you're still playing Physalis, then there's that too. And it's not immediately clear, like, well, I only have this option, which was kind of like how it worked up until this point with like you only had 3 CP Ramu and Ixion and 1 CP Ramu. That's it. There's like no other lightning summons even exist at this point, So now you get to start being a little bit choosy with this, and if this Ramu is the right lightning summon for the meta, well, then you're going to play it. And if it's not, then you're going to play the other ones. And it's not as big of a deal, I think.
It's fair. Good assessment. Next, we have Ramza, more crystal support. I do love that he has an indiscriminate break, and it's cool that he like retains that beyond when he enters the field.
Right.
But he's also a small body. I don't know. Exit triggers tend to not be that great. Like maybe he's fine if you're doing lightning crystals, but I don't know who's doing those.
Yeah, I think if you're playing Water Lightning Crystals, which I wouldn't be totally surprised if it came back, Sildra's gone, so Mono Water is a little bit weaker than it was before. We got a lot more ways to make crystal cards, so you have the Cecils, Water Lightning 4 hasn't traditionally been a deck. However, if you go look at like the starter deck Kane, it's actually pretty good and works with all of these other cards, and you can do the Cecil stuff. There's also Porum is just a good card generally, and obviously making a bunch of crystals, that's very good for Glaciella, and this card not consuming the crystal is pretty good. It's also a knight, so you can search it with Kultana. It works with, Agrius and, those other kinds of things too. Now, I'm not really sure Agrius is up to par nowadays, but, it is a nice little option. I expect this to pop up if Water Lightning Crystals is good. And also, if there's just like an aggro crystal deck, well, this is just going to be a great fit for that. We had the knight ice lightning or like ice water crystal decks that were like popping up a little while back because that old Agrius, the ice Agrius, it's a pretty good card, and there's Charlotte and stuff like that, and this card is a knight, and it is a nice little aggro 2CP card that works in there. So I don't think this card is like changing the game, but it is nice, and it is very annoying that you can just kind of like haste it in and say, well, you're gonna take a damage or I'm gonna kill something, and that is a nice little dynamic that it has going for it.
Yeah, revive Lastwell for me, Rams. I'm hoping for you. So we end Lightning with actually one of my favorite cards in Lightning. This is Reeve. It's a 4-cost backup that I want to play turn 1. It's an EX burst, but specifically, so it's only 3 cards from the top of your deck, but keyword, you look at them. You do not reveal them, and I can't. To me, that is huge, that if I'm playing Reeve turn 1, and I'm doing those other reveal 5s we mentioned, you have a pretty good look at what you're playing against if you're my opponent. Whereas here, nope, I just get to check it myself, pick the best thing, hopefully another backup, and then carry on with my day. And and the thing is, like, I don't have to be playing Turks because I'm playing him, and the burst is, I just love it. The look mechanic is so seldom used, but I definitely have Opus 5 Legend Porum flashback, so like I'm so high on this card.
I think it's just a nice solid card for me. I just have a problem figuring out where we're gonna play it. And also, like in Ice Lightning specifically, there's a great Reeve that you just like cannot not use. So, maybe there's a Lightning / whatever backup that can make use of it. Obviously, EX on backups like this, always good. It's always good, the like Merlewebs and stuff like that. They're always playable cards. They're just never the most important cards, and I'm not really sure, how to toss that up in deck building at any given point in time. But I would, on the flip side, be very surprised if I never put this in a deck to set. So
All right, let's start with our final main element. This is water. We have the other Levelure twin here. This is Alphino. Definitely not as inspiring as his sister. I especially don't like that even on damage 3, he still dies to Amaterasu. Like, I kind of wish he was a 7 that became a 9. Whatever. Obviously, with his sister, there's some synergy there. That the select effect is, of course, very good because it occurs on resolution and it gets around anything that choosing and all that. That being said, it's got to be dull, which isn't really Water's thing. And man, I really did like the Opus 16 Alphino one, and I know it had a big damage 5 spike, but like even just the kind of scry, the filtering through your cards, I really like that one. So I wouldn't be surprised if we go back to the other one. I'll try this one, but I don't know. I'm not feeling him as much as his sister.
Yeah, I'm kind of, I would be surprised if we didn't see like 1 or 2 of this in most of the Scion decks, just because, you get it out with Gratia when it's good, kind of thing. I think a lot of the card power, a lot of this card's power dips when Sildra left the format. I think if Sildra was in, you could just play 1 and search it when it's good, and it selects, it doesn't choose, just generally works very well with the kind of things that are going on when you could just search for any card in your deck, right? In that regard, it's still probably good enough to, get in off the Alizé when it's good, get in off the Gratia when it's good, but obviously you're not, like, jamming 3 of this, and it's probably not your only option for Alphinaud. So My take on it is, if I was playing Scions, I'd probably play, you know, like one of this one of the fire one, maybe some of the other water ones or something like that, and kind of vary it up a little bit so that I can kind of toolbox out the ones that I want at the right time.
Yeah. That's fair. Good assessment. Well, let's stick with some water scions. We have Urianger here, and so he has a great effect, obviously, when he enters, that you can search out any category 14 forward. You can even search a copy of himself if you wanted to for some reason. The one thing is his restriction, where you just have to have a single card removed. Now, that does count any way removed. So if Man in Black has removed a summon, if you have a warped card, that is considered removed from the game. If, of course, you've misdragoned. Oracle of Light is a really good combo with this because she's going to remove herself anyway to revive something. I'm a little concerned if you see him too early. Like, what if you see him turn 1? Because I don't think you ever want to put him out. Maybe you're just patient with him then. Maybe you're like, all right, or you just dump him and like hope to get him back later. But since it's only a single card, I don't see that being a big hurdle. At the same time, I'm a little biased towards the old EX Burst Lightning Urianger, but he wasn't amazing. It was just nice because he had a burst and he looked at 2. So what do you think of Urianger here?
Yeah, again, I think it's another one of the cards where we could probably see like a split, maybe play like 3 of this one of the old one, or like some combination of the Urianger, just because the other one, you know, it has EX Burst. You know, there's nothing wrong with having a couple of extra, especially when you're playing these kinds of theme toolboxy decks that work. Obviously, fantastic for Scions. Works really well with Warp. You know, like I mentioned earlier. You warp the Astinian, it's just already online. You know, and if you're playing Lightning, especially, you know, mono or whatever, you probably have Man in Black. You know, that's just like a pretty good card. Works with X-Death too, which obviously X-Death isn't particularly good with your own, like Ali saying, like your own breakdown effects. However, you know, good. It works with all this toolbox if you don't get the right card at the right time. So I think this card is fantastic. I think this is probably one of the best searching cards that we ever had at this point. You know, it's like, I think obviously it's not Sildra, but you know, hard to complain with this kind of card. The other big thing is, it's not just a Scion card either. Obviously, Mono Water isn't particularly well known for, you know, its own like removal effects, so it's a little more difficult to get this card online.Maybe you have to play some more cards, but this card says search Primal Leviathan, so that's just pretty good, I think.
It's pretty good.
I do think if you were so inclined to like try some new Mono Water strategies that are a little less conventional. You know, maybe you're playing Mist, maybe you're playing Renoa, maybe you're playing some of the other Warp water cards. You know, hey, splash an Urianger in there and just get your Leviathan online earlier.
Good tech with that, Urianger. Next we have, or with Leviathan, said the wrong cards. Next we have a Walker at your service. Oh, I loved this character in 10. Took him 20 sets, but hey, he's finally got a card. Is he any good, though? Well, his art is awesome. I really love just how pleased he looks, and he's handing the potion. He's kind of like the old Opus 2 Meryl Webb. He's obviously one cheaper, but with the downside that to have any text, he has to be the third backup. Luckily, he counts himself as the third, but if you saw this turn 1, that's no good. So, like, I can't help but compare him to Meryl Webb because it's pretty much almost like a 1-to-1 comparison. I would like him better. I wonder if he should have had like a blank effect, like just hey, when he enters, do one thing, and then if he enters later, then you get like the extra one. Right. I don't know. Maybe it should have like been draw 1, discard 1, and then if he enters later instead, that's when you get the draw 2. Oh well, This is the card we got. What do you think?
I think this card. I want to say my instinct and like the pattern that I have with these kinds of cards in general is that they're bad. They're just like really bad. However, you can search this card with Buddy. It is particularly appealing in L3 where we're kind of playing like Waka, even though we don't really have that many 10 and water cards. Like this does kind of work better in that kind of shell. Additionally, you know, we lost Sildra in Mono Water. Are you potentially interested in getting more ways to filter through your deck really, really quickly? However, you know, like, I'm going to feel so bad when I EX burst this on, like, turn 2 against an aggro deck, and I don't get to do the thing, you know? The other thing is just, like, I've played against this card already, which is pretty surprising. I didn't think I was going to, but I played against this card already, and the instant my opponent hit 3 backups, I EX burst this card versus him, and I was very, very upset. I was like, oh, that just feels so bad, you know, like... Of course, you're on backups, 2 backups for several turns, and instantly you hit 3. I hit this card on the X. Yeah, I want to say that I just dislike cards like these in general, but it does tick a lot of boxes that maybe things just line up for this card at some point, especially in L3.
Yeah, Soldier would have been huge that you could search it with the other backups, hold on to it, and then make sure you put it down at the right time. Well, let's move on to... Oh, he's not a legend. He's just a hero. This is a water hero. This is Cecil. Here's our paladin one. We did talk a lot about this earlier. I don't know if I really have anything new to add. Obviously, the Luminous Blast isn't as much damage, but it's also power reduction, good combat trick. Is there anything you really want to add about this one? Or
there's not a whole lot to talk about with this, other than, like... the Palom and stuff like that. It's like when you look at it in a vacuum, it's like, well, the Palom needs a crystal to do the AK. But if you just play the Palom, then the Cecil is giving you the crystal, and then so I think it just works really well in general. Obviously, makes a ton of crystals for Laciella, just a great card, and protecting Rydia is just obscene. Yeah. So there's that too.
Fantastic. The Rydia dream will never die. You're welcome, Hoods. Here we have the Hippocampus, which was one of the new raids in Endwalker. I'm kind of surprised that this got a card so soon. So when I first saw this, I was just like, this is terrible. Like, when would you ever use this? Because I tend to think of cards in their mono form first. Like, mono water doesn't want this. What does it want this for? But then I thought of combinations. Well, what if you combined it with something like Squall? That 4K usually isn't enough to hit the board the way you want to. Okay, but now if you're doing 2 characters, you got 5 backups, maybe Squall now becomes a 7K cleave or an 8K cleave. So I've always kind of liked Water Fire 2 as a dual element, so that was the one that really stood out to me. Beyond that, I don't know. It's kind of just weird that he's weaker Cagnazzo, because Cagnazzo did power reduction. But I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something with this, and actually there's some kind of activation shenanigans you can do, but you can only do the effect once per turn. So I don't know. How do you feel about Hippocampus?
Yeah, I think this card is really bad. I thought for maybe you could do it twice and do some cool removals, and then I reread the card and I was like, oh, you can only use one. It's just doesn't really work with anything you want to make it work with. I was trying to build around it in my head when it was first revealed, and then reading the card again, and then looking at other options that we have, and I was just like, are we supposed to Cagnazzo and Hippocampus? What year is it? I'm not going to put 9 cards on the board so that I can activate this and then play Cagnazzo and actually clear a board. I'm just going to play, the demon and call it a day. So.
Yeah, all done. Well, let's get one more water monster. This is Blue Goo. Man, I don't know. There's something about his face. He just looks so just happy or serious, or I don't even know. Again, another one I kind of blew off. His entry effects, kind of whatever. However, choose an auto ability, choosing a forward you control. It's a little specific, but I did wonder, well, what if there's a very specific forward you want to protect? Rydia, her name has come up a lot. At the same time, we also have other effects like forward Minwu, and that do protect things. It's not oh, this is the only thing we have to protect something. Right. So, yeah, it's probably fodder.
Yeah, I think that there's a small case for this one in Leo specifically, because you have to play some amount of 1 CP monsters. Mm-hmm. It's just a requirement. And, maybe choosing an auto ability that is targeting a forward you control does something sometimes. Probably not, but, maybe. So, it could show up there. I tried it in Leo. It didn't do anything, so probably gets cut eventually, but it's there.
You know what else is just there? Fremelda. I think it was you. Someone said in the Discord, someone was really high on this card, and you're like, this isn't even the best Fremelda we have. Yeah, definitely a much bigger fan of the more recent one we got. It's slow. It's got to wait to attack. It's just, I don't know. I just don't care about it.
Yeah, it's not even the best Fremelda in water. Somebody tried to tell me this is the best Fremelda we have, and I was like, no, you're crazy. The hero one is 1,000 times better, but yeah.
Speaking of having better cards, this is Porum. So the twin sister, not only in the game to her brother Palom, but also to the Palom card we saw earlier. And again, it's fine. Draw 1 discards, never bad. Gaining crystals aren't bad, but it's Porum also universally has such better cards. Opus 9 Porum still shows up. Opus 15 Legend Porum is still great. Are you going to pick this over one of those? I just can't see that happening.
Yeah, I tried this one, and I felt like the crystals that it was generating, well, like, it's fine, but you have to play so many 4 cards, and when you're playing a 4 deck, you want the 4 cards in your hand, so I'm, like, a little confused about if this is just supposed to be generic, like, draw discard kind of card, and I'm not really getting it. The Palom, it makes, like, a ton of sense. I know exactly how you're supposed to use it, right? You're supposed to get a crystal off of Cecil, and then kill something, and then you're supposed to sack the Opus 9 Porom with it and kill something. This one, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do with it, and it competes with 2 other really, really strong Poroms, and I'm just kind of like not particularly interested in going out of my way to make this one work when I have 2 really good options right next to it, you know?
Yeah, would have been a good effect on a Ford character that didn't have such a strong name clash. Well,
yeah, it's got a really good art, though.
Yeah. And next we have no name clash at all, The Fiend. I know you kind of hinted at in our last video that maybe you weren't super high on this card, but dude, I love this card. There is a card currently in Standard Magic. It's some big blue monster, and it basically says the first thing your opponent casts in that turn, you just cancel it outright, which is so annoying. And so it's cool to see this effect. There's no tax. There's no, well, if this, it just says, nope. Whatever it is they do, cancel it. I love that. And then, of course, the more damage it gets, the just harder he is to deal with. And if you try to attack me with an ability, cancel it. Try to deal me damage, that's my power, cancel it. I'm just going to call him the canceller. That being said, what if they don't play a lot of summons and you're not on high damage? It's a blank card. And as much I want this card to succeed so badly, but I can't close my eyes to that in the situations where they're not doing that, he actually doesn't do anything. He just sits there and, ugh, that bums me out. However, he is category 6 and he's water, and we've seen some of that. So maybe you just throw him in there as a one of protection. They can't hecaton your board so easily. I'm really got my fingers crossed for this card because I think he's so cool and I want to see him succeed. Is he going to, though?
I think as a generic water card, I'm not particularly interested in this card. Just like as a generic hate bear card, these are always the kinds of cards that, like, when I play this card, it does nothing, and when my opponent plays this card, it soloed me and I couldn't do anything, and it was completely uncounterable. That's what this card often feels like, right? I think the place we're most likely to see it is going to be in Tricolor 6. You need to have some amount of water cards to make that deck work at all. And having these kinds of stun cards where it negates the summon ones, and then on damage 3 it also negates an ability once, and it gets kind of annoying. It is a particularly good way to deal with the Hecaton chairs and like these kinds of rather difficult control matchups that the deck can experience if you don't have some amount of these. We saw a lot of it in Fire Ice with General Leo. It's kind of the same thing, but it's not quite as unwieldy. It's a little bit more consistent in that way, and it also offers you your third color, which you might need, for your Stragos, for your Realms, or whatever. And obviously, you can still cast summons with this, so you can still use Amaterasu, or whatever it is you're going to do. So I think specifically in the tricolor 6 deck, this card is going to show up 2, maybe 3, in there. As just a generic, a hate bear card, I don't think that this is a particularly great use of your slots.
Fair, very fair. Next, we have Mist, and I adore this card, and I want to give the design team just a big thumbs up because they really worked hard to just make this an interesting card to use. Whether it ends up being great or not, I just appreciate the design space. So it's Warp 4. Oh my gosh, catch me, I'm fainting. Except it gives you something every time a warp counter comes off of it. And because the warp is 0, you can put this in any deck. And then when she finally comes in, she's a body that also just draws you a card. If you don't know it, there's a keyword in Magic called Surveil, and that's essentially what this is. Bless you, sir. Where you check the top card of your deck, and if you don't like it, you throw it away. And again, I've already got my backup set. Bless you again. More backups. Throw it away. No, Mist. You're allergic to Mist. I get it. That being said,
no. She's my fave.
Okay, excellent. Of course, the first turn you warp her, nothing happens. But again, she doesn't cost you anything. I think you're going to like this more, of course, if you see it earlier in the game. Maybe you're trying to get to your backups, you're trying to filter out dead cards. Later in the game, probably not so much. But at her worst, she also just replaces herself as a 2-cost. So, like, I really appreciate this card. She is the faith of Eureka, so of course that's why, someone was talking about Jared. That's why he was sneezing. So as you talk about her too, the one thing I want you to answer for me, will you slap this anywhere, or do you think you still stick to water with this? Tell me about the faith of Eureka.
Right. So, well, this card has like a ton of utility. So for me, I'm most excited to play this in water because obviously, like I said, it turns on the Eureka that we were talking about a second ago. But also, you can just play it. It's just like a nice little cantrip. Draw an extra card, fill up your breaks a little faster. Get a few more water characters over the board. That's just something that we're interested in doing pretty often. It is a little slot intensive to play such a low impact card and potentially a card disadvantage for a prolonged amount of time. Though if anyone can get away with it, it's going to be mono water, right? So there is that. Also, we lost Sildra, so card selection is a lot more important than it was before. So I'm a lot more interested in playing this. Outside of that, obviously, like you said, it's Warp 0, you can put it in any deck. That's just like the way it works. So in that regard, Vayne decks is a big place that I would imagine this going, especially in L3. Always having a Vayne target is not something you're guaranteed to have. Like right when you play that deck. That is part of why Vayne is such like a middling card in that strategy a lot of times. Is sometimes there's just not enough cards worth that you can actually turn the Vayne on and start drawing cards with that pretty consistently. And this card is just a nice, a great way, in fact, to get that on and get your card selection going. Obviously, when the warp counters move, you can stack that so that you can check the card that you get before you draw with Vayne. So it really improves that card just a ton. So if you are playing a Vayne strategy, I think this is just a slam dunk card. There are some other niche use cases for it. So, there's the reveal top cards of the deck kinds of things. So, like, there's the Crystal Setzer. That is going to be a really cool card to combo with this one. I don't think it's going to be super competitive, obviously, or like Arden, right?
Yeah.
These kinds of effects are kind of janky gacha stuff, and Miss kind of like lets you cheat the gacha. But she doesn't let you choose the card that's going on for your deck. It just like lets you check and make sure it's a good one or filter for a potentially better one. So those kinds of strategies, a little more against the odds kind of approach, but just a card that has so many cool approaches. This is the coolest warp card I think that they've made. Probably not the best. The best is probably Estinian, but this card is just so cool and does so many things. And everybody loves to draw cards. Everybody likes to scry. Like who doesn't like this card?
Yeah, no, it's great. They knocked it out of the park with that one. Next we have Melia Duel, and I like the design of these like lockdown cards. I like the idea of just, hey, I'm just locking this card out, kind of like the Vincent where he would lock out the backup, the Opus 16 one. I just wish she had some form of protection or something, because again, they just, let me get rid of that, and now my Une is free to tap every turn. Because someone had mentioned, like, well, you've already got, like, Cuchulainn and Porum. I was like, yeah, but those go on the stack. So again, you can say, okay, blank that card, and they go, okay, well, in response, I'll do its thing anyway. So I like that this one just has this, nope, I'm holding you down. Again, there's nothing to keep it alive either, so they'll just get rid of it if it's a problem.
Yeah, this is one of those cards that, like, the effect is really good, but the stat line and the fact that it's a forward is just kind of problematic for the card. It's just like, you can't play a 3CP 7k body that doesn't do anything on entry, that doesn't really, it's just not good enough. Now, this same effect, put it on a monster, all of a sudden, like, I am, like, a 1CP or a 2CP monster, I'm suddenly, like, very interested in that card, Especially because, like, if it leaves, now I can eat it with Mira or bounce back to my hand to use it again, Those kinds of things I would be a lot more interested in. On a 3CP 7k body, I don't think so.
Yeah, not so much. But we do have a water legend. This is Yuna. Some gorgeous artwork. Man, oh man, I'm very curious to know what you think about this card. Because this one is, I feel like I haven't heard as many strong opinions. So if she's ever chosen by an ability, you just discard a summon, cancel its effects. And that's kind of her whole thing is summons. And she's a summoner, so she can be searched out. anytime you cast any summon, you draw a card, which is clearly great. Like, that's just so much value. It will only trigger once per turn, but it also triggers on your opponent's turn. So you can draw on your turn, you can draw on their turn. And then her special is actually quite good as well. Feeds into summons. Specials are kind of specials. My only thing is, though, like a lot of these cards we've talked about, but it's also pay 5 to actually do nothing. And then you have to have the summons in your hand. And my one thing with cards like this, too, any card that protects itself, kind of what we just touched on, right? If you're protecting yourself, you have to have something worth protecting. Is Yuna worth protecting? Because she doesn't actually, like, get rid of forwards on the board. She doesn't have this, like, threat. She just is generation if you're willing to spend something. So I don't know. I guess I'm kind of in the middle on this one. Maybe I need to see it in an action to prove. And it's also named Yuna, and so there's obviously clash with that name. Like, how do you see our favorite summoner?
I think this card has been adjusted and balanced to a T. Like, very specifically, this is the exact line where I'm not totally sold on the card, but it still seems really good.
Yeah.
And I have played with it, for sure. Drawing a card every time you do the summon, great. However, you can't just put whatever summons you want into the deck at this point. You really have to think about how they play with Yuna at any given point in time. So, I've made it in Earth Water, and it's difficult to get the Yuna to draw every turn. I think we've seen this where, like I was just saying with Vayne, it's not a guarantee that you have the right summon at the right time and can do it. So you really need to, like, if I'm just playing, Hecaton Chair, Fenrir's, stuff like that, it's not a guarantee that I'm going to draw with Yuna all the time. So you really need to think about exactly what summons you're going to put in your deck when you play this card. And obviously, it works really, really well with the free summons, right? Like the Leviathan, stuff like that. I think, obviously, very, very good with, Moogle and Poo Poo and, these kinds of the cantrip summons, Kuch Lane. Cantrip summons, fantastic, obviously. Additionally, very, very good with wind summons because they're so cheap and they're so good at protecting and they're so good at, like activating, and they just cantrip really, really well. The Alexander, Chocobo, Azura, these are just very, very cheap, good summons. Also, hey, Brother searches for Yuna, so maybe there's a wind water thing going on right here. And while it is true, that there are no shortage of good wind water, like, Yuna options, this is another one, and that does matter. And you can play multiple because she has an S ability, so there is something going for this card. There is definitely a home for it. I'm not sure if it's Earth Water, I'm not sure if it's Wind Water, I'm not sure if it's Mono Water, but I definitely expect to see this card a lot throughout the set. The Can't Be Chosen by Abilities has just shown to be such great text on these kind of, like, long... it's like the 2CP Rydia. It's obviously a lot more expensive and there's more conditions on it, but having this kind of protection effect on these cards that continuously generate advantage over time, if you build around them correctly, they're always strong. And I think that Yuna also fits into that same mold.
Awesome. I hope we get to see a lot of her because she's got some beautiful artwork. Another one I do expect to see, and this is Unicorn, really helped out by the fact that not only is it Category 6, it actually gets stronger if you have a Category 6 forward, but unlike Fenrir, which was in Earth, this is in Water, so if you're doing that tricolor, like you said, you need to play a certain amount of Water cards to fill that out. I'm not as huge on the bounce, especially since it's restricted, but sometimes that is really relevant depending on what the forward is. But I actually just like the activation and draw. There's not a whole lot in 6 that, like, I need it to be active. Maybe one of the old Umaros or something. If you did the one that, like, could discard, you could actually attack with it, then reactivate it and break it to make them discard. But just more importantly, it draws you a card, which I really like that. So I think it's pretty good in 6. Outside of that, there's probably better. Like, Water has so many good summons to pick from, even with just losing Sildra. So I mainly see it in 6. Do you see it anywhere else?
I don't think that this card is playable outside of 6, and I'm going to be pretty firm on that one because if you notice, the top ability is just Opus 1 Sylph, the water summon, but without EX Burst. So you can't just play this in your deck. It's just not good enough. So I think you need to have a very, very specific configuration of your deck to really justify playing this card. And I think in 6 is also really only good if you're playing it with Realm, doubling up on the effect. or if you're very, very certain that you're going to play a lot against a lot of like Ice Lightning, for example, when you're playing the aggro mirror and your opponent has dull freeze effects, it can be very, very important to have these activate effects, and you can get a pretty huge tempo gain if you expect to play against Ice Lightning with this.
Yeah.
In those like specific scenarios, I think the card is fantastic. Now, however, like it also just like does basically nothing against like control decks.
Yeah.
You know, like it's can be pretty close to unplayable unless you're doubling it against, you know, those kinds of strategies. So, do I expect to see a lot of this card? No. However, it would definitely not surprise me if Tricolor 6 specifically picked up on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. We have our Crystal backup. We'll move past that to Fisher. Oh, this backup's so disappointing. So it has clear anti-synergy with Lena, where Lena wants to be junking a bunch of your cards, and he wants to keep them in there. I just wonder, because I just don't see this card ever getting played, so I'll posit to you, is there a different number that could have made this viable? What if it said 5? What if it said 7?
Ooh.
Like, what number would you need to be like, okay, now I want to use that?
I think 6 and 7 starts to get pretty dicey there, right? You know, you start getting like, it doesn't seem impossible to just get 20 water cards in your break zone pretty quickly if you tried, right? But then you also milled yourself 20, like say 21 cards for 7, right? You also milled yourself 21 cards, and then you also want to draw 3 and break a backup by doing it. It is pretty difficult. I think it starts to get dangerous around 6, 7, and then it starts to get like eyebrows raised around like 5, I think is when I would be like, how about this one? So, yeah.
All right, next we have Lady Luna Freya. I love the Famford effect. Always a good effect, although I guess you could somewhat argue maybe it's gotten weaker as cards have gotten cheaper. It tends to be easier to put more bodies on the field. Clearly meant to work with her warp, that you come in, so like let's say they have 2 forwards, you bounce the weaker one, and then that way they're forced to sack the other one. But again, not only is she a small body and she costs 4, it's 3 turns, and it's just, without Vayne or something else, 3 turns is just too long to wait for a card that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, this one is... If you were gonna play this kind of card, then like Renoa just seems like a pretty straight improvement on it a lot of the time. The Warp Renoa, you wait fewer turns, it's the same cost, but you get a better body, and the S ability on that one is good. And again, there's the whole, you know, Warp 3 for 1 can be very good with Vayne, you know, like I was just talking about. However, meh.
Yeah.
You know, just in general, better Luna Freya's probably.
Yeah. Meh. Next, we have Leslie, who is, you know, technically it's one of the most efficient bounce effects we have on a forward that's unrestricted. Again, like we saw with the, what did we see? Oh, the Unicorn, you know, it's restricted to 4 costs. This is just bounce anything, bounce anything. And if you discard the 7 card, you also get the drawback, which is clearly good. Beyond that, though, I don't know. I just don't know where this card goes. Like, maybe if some water variant of 7 that wants to use Andrea Rodea pops up, but I just, again, it's. I don't think there's anything wrong with this text. I just don't know where to put this.
Yeah, I basically agree. Obviously, it's not like this has some like pretty high name clash, but it's 7 and in water, which is just kind of like a weird thing. Also, like, water has all sorts of great, you know, discard effects. I'm not really sure why I'm supposed to be playing like 7 cards with it. It's just weird.
Yeah. A card I absolutely love is the Loperate here. This is a 14 backup, and so you enter, you draw 2, and particularly you place it on the bottom of your deck. Now, maybe some people would rather you load up the break zone for Lena, but as far as I can tell, Water has no issue with that. But what Water does have an issue with is decking out, and this card says, I'm actually going to prevent you from decking out by just that little much, and then the action ability just repeats the exact same effect. Like, I think this is super sweet. I love this card.
Yeah, big on this one. It's got the right. It's a category 14 standard unit, so it makes your Grahatia bigger. I think that's a pretty undernoticed aspect of the card. Is it just works really, really well with like putting your Grahatia targets that you didn't want to draw back into your deck, and then also working and enabling him. I think it's just good for Water in general. You know, like there are sometimes you want to draw and discard cards because you want to get the Lena up, and I guess in those specific kinds of decks, like obviously it does work. On the other hand, in some versions of Water, especially Leo, we don't have that many good 3-drops that we want to play on the backup lineup. It's mostly just Waka. And then Leonara if you are going to play a forward Porum, but there's not a lot of summons, so there's not a lot of good forward Porum selection. So I think this card is a slam dunk for that big card, because not only do you get to draw and like filter your hand, you get to put the card back, which means at some point you'll get it back with you can Leo into it, which is something that deck has never been able to do, and I think it is a pretty big deal for that deck specifically.
Some good moon bunnies there. There's the free cost backups. We talked about those.
Yep.
Here's Rosa. We've touched on her pretty extensively. I just want to say how much I love this artwork. It's fantastic. Is there anything else you want to add to her? Or?
Yeah, I guess just to touch briefly on the whole, like, how do you build 4 kind of thing. I've said that, like, you can do Water Earth and just not play this card. I've tried this card for mono water and then just playing all of the off-color 4 cards that I want to play, and it works surprisingly well. The neck of the whole, like, the bottleneck that you're gonna have there is that you have to search for Rosa to get the ball rolling, and that kind of can be problematic. So then I built a version of it that was wind water that used Stiltskin and Sid Polendina to search this, and also Sid Polendina obviously searched the other stuff, and that worked really well. So I think that this card is deceptively quite useful and pretty good. I would not be so quick to poo-poo this one. I think this one is actually got some legs behind it. It felt really, really good playing Wind Water deck, but then I also got to just play Palom for no reason, for example. It just like worked really, really well. So yeah, I would think that there will be a version of a 4 deck that plays this card at some point. Is it the best version of the 4 deck? Is it the best Cecil and Radia deck? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? But I do think that the card is potentially quite powerful.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, I will be quick to poo-poo our final water card. This is Waka. Dude, I can't get past the 7 in the corner. I know you probably would never pay 7 for this, but it's still just like, what? 7 doesn't do anything. He has to wait a whole turn, and then when he attacks, he wants you to give up your resources to do 8k damage. That's it. Like, as I was reading this, I was like, it's going to be some big payoff, right? No, it's just 8k. There's so many cards that can do 8k that don't require me to kill my own backups.
Right.
Like, hey, I'm not feeling this one, brother.
Yeah, don't line this one up against Ash.
Yep, that's it. All right, folks, that is it for water. We are done with the main 6 elements. That means there's one short video left to go, and that's just covering those light and dark cards. No multi-element this time, so don't go anywhere. Jared and I will be back for that final video shortly. Until then, take care.
Peace out.